DreamHack Open is brought to you by Corsair, Monster Energy, Esport Management, and GGBet.
Day one done and dusted, but we've still got 2 more to go. No puns intended, Dust. Don't shake your head at me. Welcome to DreamHack Open Rio 2019. Day 2 just about to begin as we trudge our way through the lower portion of both groups to determine who will be going on to the playoffs tomorrow, joining the few teams that have already made it. I'll be your host for the show, Bach. Quick shout out to our sponsors for this event as well, Corsair, Monster Energy, Esports Management, and GGBet for making all of this possible. Big thank you to you and also everyone at home who is currently watching with us. I'm joined on the desk by Potter and Dust. I did this yesterday. I said experts just to mock Dust, but he did a pretty decent job yesterday, so I guess I can't do that.
By the way, I like to unofficially trademark the term done and dusted.
Done and dusted.
I feel like that's fair. I feel like I fairly should be able to claim that, right?
Yeah.
Stand by me. All right, thank you. Appreciate you.
Okay,
Potter.
there you go.
I'm on your side.
I appreciate you.
We'll put a little R on there, registered trademark for Dust Moran.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
That's only right, I think.
Okay, so what are you going to charge if someone uses that? What's
Probably
your royalty
nothing.
fee? Then what's
No.
the point?
It's because, I don't know. Because I want to trademark something. It's a
Understandable.
life goal, bucket list item.
Understandable. Now, yesterday we had so many big plays. There was a lot of great games yesterday in general. We watched Avagar and E United start the day off strong with that triple overtime game that was just absolutely amazing to watch. And we'll actually have E United up on stage in just a minute fighting for their chance to stay alive in the tournament after being unable to best Avant-Garde.
Yeah, and this was our first match of the day, right? And it got the crowd hyped, it got us hyped, and it was definitely a really explosive start to the day.
And even this game here on Mirage was way closer anticipated. We had W7M, a huge underdog here, playing against a star-studded lineup on Valiance, and that went to the brink. It was a 16-13 game when it was all said and done. And now we're taking a look at Furia, who unfortunately, one of the teams that got upset yesterday. This is actually kind of one of the more surprising results of the day. The passion of INTZ shining through, coming in after a tough time at EPL and making some things happen.
And we just saw Ince's coach there right after KNG's highlight clip there. He had to calm his team down. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that today, just the hyped Brazilian crowd and the hyped Brazilian teams.
Indeed, now we're seeing Avant-Garde. Of course, this is their game that they won on Mirage against INTZ to actually book themselves into the semifinals. So they will not be playing today. Sharks, who we saw just before that on screen, were actually the other team. We didn't get to have them on the mainstream, unfortunately, but they did indeed find themselves in the playoffs as well. So already one Brazilian team for the home crowd to cheer for in the playoffs.
It's actually somewhat surprising, too. We'll take a look at the group so you can see just how things went down, but the fact that Sharks make it through over Valiance, who actually was feeling very confident, like we talked about it after the interview with Nexar yesterday, they seemed very confident. Like there was no pressure on them whatsoever, but we also talked about how there was pressure because they're the team who should make it out of this group, and then they struggle to beat Sharks, so Sharks actually books their tickets to the playoffs, and now Valiance is going to be fighting off against either W7M or Redemption.
For sure, and yesterday that game was one of the last games of the night, and so it was off stream but in the backstages. But yeah, it was very surprising. It was surprising that it came down to Train. We know that we just saw Sharks play on Train, and they won pretty handedly versus Redemption POA. But yeah, Train seems to be a map that Sharks is feeling very confident on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the maps that the most drilled on, so no surprise that they would have some of their best showings on that map. But yeah, certainly when you looked at the groups, you thought Valiance for sure is shoe-in to be the first seed out, and it would be a battle between W7M and Sharks probably for number 2. Now it's the other way around. Sharks are already through now. Valiance has to kind of fight a little bit harder, a little bit later on today, try to make sure that they still at least maintain a playoff spot.
Well, we can take a look at Group A as well, as we had probably one of the heavier stacked groups just as far as teams. Avant-Garde and E United went toe-to-toe early on with that overtime game. Then Furia and Ince was the Brazilian derby that I think the crowd mostly got behind, both teams getting cheers. But now we've got a decider of E United versus Furia, and if the crowd was against E United when they played Avant-Garde, I fear for their lives when they're playing against Furia.
For sure, and yesterday we saw Furia a little bit quiet, a bit of a surprising match on Mirage versus Ince. I hope that's not the case today. I think Furia probably went back and discussed what went wrong, and they were able to recollect themselves because they actually never really got into the game yesterday.
Yeah, it's brutal for United, though, by the way. I mean, you played a triple overtime game that you almost pulled the upset on the open up the day against Avangar, and now your second opponent is Furia, a team who's been kind of tearing it up in the Americas region and tore them up in some qualifiers for DreamHack Dallas, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So they definitely had a hard road ahead of them coming into this tournament. Even if they wound up going out, I feel like they were still pretty impressive, though. So hopefully they'll at least give us a good fight in that game against Furia.
For sure. They definitely were impressive, and it's really unfortunate that this is the elimination match to start off the day.
It's a brutal group. We knew that going in.
It's the short straw. They really did draw the short straw. Like, yeah, they got to play Avangar first. That's tough. Probably should have beat them in that game. They didn't. Now they have to play Furia, who probably also should have beaten INTZ. It's like two teams who were really picked to beat their opponents potentially. You were the only one who had Avangar. We had E United, and it ended up being a very, very close game. We can take a look at the map vetoes as well as the teams are getting ready to pick the maps. What should we expect to see here, Dust?
Well, both times that they played against each other in the Dallas qualifiers, Furia banned Dust 2, so I'd expect that to still continue. In those games, United banned Mirage one time and Overpass one time, so I'm kind of curious to see if they'll stick with one of those bans and kind of respect some of the strengths of Furia, or if they will kind of go a different direction. I would imagine both teams are going to float Vertigo,
Vertigo.
I think it's going to float into the second banning phase, but I feel like it's going to be that game of chicken, like who's going to ban it in the second phase. It could come out as a third map, possibly, but I wouldn't expect someone to just reach for it and pick it. Unless you're E United and you're thinking to yourself, man, we've lost this team the last two times we've played them in best of threes, and they were very one-sided best of threes. I'll say Furia tore them up in that DreamHack Dallas qualifier. So United might be looking at Vertigo as an opportunity to pull off an upset. So they could pick it first, but I just feel like it'll float. So there is the respect ban on Mirage that kind of was alluded to, and I think, again, that you should see a Dust 2 ban here from Furia. I'm not sure why they would go any other direction than that.
We should definitely have a little bit more of an exciting veto process here, especially because it is the BO3. So each team only gets one ban each to start off with. So the Vertigo Dream and the Nuke Dream, with Cash not being in the map pool in this tournament, those dreams are actually real.
Yeah, like we were saying it yesterday, because the map pool is so strange right now, where you have Dust 2, which a lot of teams aren't really super fond of, and then you have Nuke, which more teams are even less fond of. So it's like, okay, well, which one of those do we let through? And now you have the Vertigo play. It's like, okay, so there's now 3 maps that we don't really play all that much. Like, I remember teams like Space Soldiers, for instance. Space Soldiers never played Nuke, never played Dust 2. So how does a team like that operate when then another new map comes in that maybe they don't play? So it does end up getting banned, which is kind of disappointing.
This is interesting, actually. This is like the reverse picks of their series, because last time around when they had those 2 bans, it was actually Furia who picked Inferno and E United picked Nuke. So now it's actually the other way around. So definitely not surprised to see those 2 maps, but kind of different, not the order I thought it would be picked in. And then, yeah, we talked about it, probably teams all day today, I would imagine, are going to be floating this Vertigo second ban, and then you were going to have Train as a decider instead. So I think if we do see Vertigo, it'll very likely be like a chicken thing where it comes down to the third map or something like that, or like a surprise pick from someone to try to pull off an upset early.
Definitely.
Well, the players are setting up on stage, so we'll take a peek at the E United boys, who kind of looked a little disappointed after that Avangar game yesterday. I walked into the players' lounge, just looked at them, and just everything was just like, I can't believe he didn't pull that one out.
Yeah, they looked really defeated, and rightly so. It was so close to them. It was right in their grasp. But teams like United, who are trying to break through the scene and really establish themselves as a top NA team, they do have to face these tribulations in these tournaments and face the stronger teams and be able to overcome that in order to actually place themselves in the top position. So it is disappointing, but it is something that they will have to get over and be able to overcome it.
I mean, this is kind of a trial by fire for me. You know, I mean, they came into this tournament without much lane experience. Pretty much the only thing they had together was that EPL group that they played just a week ago, where they took second in that group, so they're still in the hunt for a playoff spot in the EPL. But yesterday they looked impressive against Avangar. They took them to the brink, 3 overtimes. It's been a tough road for this team. They're having to play basically 2 top 15 teams in the world or something close to that in their opening 2 games here at this DreamHack Open event. So that's definitely a tall task. And Vanity, the guy you're seeing on screen, was probably the most impressive player yesterday. I mean, he's the in-game leader for the team, so that's his main role. Online, he's usually actually a pretty good fragger for IGL standards, but whenever you're coming to the LAN environment, you're expecting guys like Cooper with AWP to pop off, Marky, Food, like some of these guys that have those high skills things, but he was actually the one that was being super proactive all across the map on both sides. He's that wild card player, kind of like a Fur type figure where you kind of just go in and make these individual aggressions and hope that you can build something off of it. So one side, I feel like it's respectable and commendable that he's able to do that type of thing, but also in the back of your mind thinking like, man, it feels like you're throwing a Hail Mary every time. Like, do you have something stable you can rely on? Because this is a very scrappy team. They really rely on getting in your face and doing these looser types of plays and hoping that their individual skill can shine through.
They definitely are a very scrappy team. And speaking of Cooper, yesterday we saw him bring out the op a little bit later in the half. I believe it wasn't until the 9th or 10th round that he actually had the op in his hands. And once he did have that op, it seemed to be a lot easier for the United players. He was able to allow his teammates to rotate a lot faster on that Inferno CT side. So I'd love to see United bring out the op a little bit earlier in this half if they can, to be able to dictate the rounds and the pace a little bit easier. And also to point out Moose. He was a little bit quiet yesterday, but only because they went B so often.
Yeah.
So I expect Moose the fire breather, as Connor so put it, to come out today and to show up.
Here's what I need to see. I need to see Food step up. Like, I feel like he was the guy that didn't really show up that well at EPL compared to like a Markey or a Cooper or a Moose who are a little bit more stable in that tournament. And I feel like he has such high potential. Like, when I've watched Food play throughout Mountain Dew League, when he played on Singularity, when I've watched him play at some different LAN events towards the end of last year like WESG USA, I was massively impressed by his flexibility, his ability to play the edges of the map and be a playmaker there and kind of hold position when he needed to, but also during an execute, like, get in the mix, be that trade fragger, be that guy getting kills. You saw glimpses of that yesterday. Like, I remember that quad kill on Inferno on Banana that really felt like it got United rolling in regulation. I need to see more of that because I know he's a capable player. Like, I really felt he was one of those guys from Mountain Dew League at the end of last year that had some of the biggest chances to get opportunities on professional teams. Like, when Zelsis got picked up by Cloud9 for the major, I thought Fu was actually a guy who should have been in position to be considered there as well. Maybe he was, I'm not sure. But regardless, I hope that he can kind of live up to the potential today.
For sure. And I mean, they did look good yesterday, and specifically Food in that 4K that you're talking about. It was a set piece from E United, right? And yesterday we saw several different varieties of their set pieces for their banana approach, for their A approach, but they were struggling a little bit in their defaults, right? And so they're going to need their defaults, specifically in a best of 3, to be able to create some sort of consistency for themselves and for their teammates. So hopefully they polished up a little bit more of a slower approach, or they doubled down on their set pieces and they really focus on those because they did look good.
So here's the other thing to think about. Like, we talked about it yesterday. This is one of the few times that guys from E United have played on a stage like this. Like, they've played LAN events, but they were usually studio-based. Like, there's no audience. There's not even any kind of crowd factor. There might not even be live sound being pushed out. It's just sitting on a stage in a studio, no one watching.
Right.
And I said that to them. I was like, you guys actually played really well considering this is your first time. And you know what Vanity's response was? This game's not hard. He literally said, this game is easy. And he's like looking at his phone like so nonchalant, like this game is easy.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the confidence, but you're going up against Furia on home turf with that crowd roaring, and all 4 times you've played this team with this lineup, you've lost every single time. And 3 out of those 4 games they lost to Furia, it was 6 rounds or less from E United. So that's domination. So, like, Furia do have the edge when it comes to head-to-head history, you know, LAN experience, you know, reliable firepower in the offline environment. So, I mean, United are fighting an uphill battle here. There's no doubt about it. But they did rise to the occasion yesterday and give us a really, really good game. So I'm at least confident that we'll have a war on the stage.
They definitely do, but I like that confidence, and I like that he's keeping it simple.
Yeah.
There's an acronym, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that is the best way to go about this game. This game is completely a numbers game. It's simple, simple math, and if you keep it as such, you're going to really be able to make it as easy as possible for yourself.
Here's the man we were just talking about as well. This is Vanity with a 4K in the game earlier on Inferno, and we saw him pop off numerous times. I mean, he had somewhere in the 30s. I think he was over 30 in regulation.
I think he was over 40 by the time the overtimes were over, obviously. So definitely had a really good game. Again, I felt like he was the guy that was shutting down B a lot on the CT side, which is actually kind of different because usually it was like Food and Markey kind of playing the B bomb site when I've watched some of their previous games. So they actually shifted Vanity to playing B a little bit more. But he was also roaming a lot, right? We did see him go over to the Moto wrap a few times as well and kind of lock down the A. And then on T side, he was just all over the place, man. Whether he was like being aggressive by himself in apartments or up lane while the other 4 were hitting B, or whether he was leading attacks, like he really was super proactive, and he had kind of that vibe to him that reminds me of an Art from Furia or a Fur or a Phelps, where they make these microaggressions on the map alone and they feel very confident and they make really big plays. I feel like Vanity was by far one of the most impactful players yesterday.
He definitely was. And speaking a little bit about Furia, as they show up on your screen there, yesterday, as we mentioned, they had such a slow start. They were never able to ever actually get into the game and invest themselves into these rounds. And so hopefully today they approach it a little different. You know, yesterday I felt like they tunnel visioned a bit on their approach towards that mid on Mirage, and they kept giving KNG a quote-unquote easy pick. And so today hopefully they readjusted and their approach is slightly different.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues right now for Fury, I feel like, is land consistency, because they went from, you know, losing to a Pug team at a small open event in Atlantic City to doing well at the major to then again coming in here with a slow start. And hopefully that's not a repeat. Like, we're not going to see like Furia go out 0-2. You would think that they would have the strength. And I don't want to root against E United, but at the same point in time, Furia is a really good team who should be doing better than this.
I mean, the thing is, though, is that they don't have that many reps on LAN. Again, this team kind of broke out of nowhere in the middle of last year at the Zotac Americas event where they, came in, no one really knew much about them. They beat Complexity E United in best of threes on LAN, and then it was like, whoa, okay, hold the phone. We need to keep an eye on this team. K Serrata was an immediate star that kind of shone through at that event and throughout. But since then, we've seen them move to the Americas, dominate the Mountain Dew League, start beating some teams that are at a professional level in some of these different online qualifiers, like DreamHack Dallas, for instance. They qualified for that event. So they are a team that's not just K Serrata. You see him on the screen. Yeah, he is the star of this team. But Yuri, also a very effective, aggressive rifler. Art, the in-game leader, and Opper, who is basically fur with an op, again, is kind of the sentence I use to summarize him, because when you watch him play, he definitely has that same mindset, but just with an AWP, but also a good rifler in his own right. So it's not just K Serrata. I need to stress that because I feel like we give him a lot of praise and he deserves it. But there are some other players in this team that really make Furia as a unit a really powerful opponent for anyone to face.
For sure, and I mean, Furia really need Art to step up a little bit more. Yesterday, he was a bit more quiet. He is statistically their most successful entry fragger. I mean, he opens up the rounds with that op. He's an aggressive player. But yesterday, we saw a lot of missed shots, and it seems like maybe the nerves got to him a little bit. And as we said, they never really got into it. So he definitely needs to hit those shots today and open up some of these rounds to make it easier for his team.
I have to say, I'm a little bit curious. There was 2 players in a row where there was like some, they weren't focusing on the game. They heads down, eyes closed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of wondering what was going on there.
It looked like he was trying to really focus all his energy.
Yeah,
and,
think about this. If you're Furia, you pass up an opportunity to go play in the ESL Pro League, to come here and keep your spot in Rio that you agreed upon a month ago, and they wanted to keep that commitment, come meet their fans, play for their crowd. And look, they know they need the reps on in LAN environment like this. Again, they've only played maybe 4 or 5 LANs in the entire year that this Core 4 has been together. That's not much compared to most other teams out there. So getting a big run at this tournament was a big goal of theirs, and it should have been certainly attainable. I think next to Avangard and Valiance, Furia are one of the teams that you expect to have a good shot at the finals, and then they dropped their opening game yesterday against a team that you thought they surely would be able to beat based on the histories of these 2 teams. So they need to run it all the way back. That's a gauntlet that they must run through. And so, yeah, like you said, probably just like thinking about the task ahead.
So, looking at the odds, it does look like in general Furia has a slight edge, and you guys can also take part in the chat as well. You saw it pop up just a minute ago. So, predictions at this point. We know the maps, we know the teams, we know what to expect. Dust, this is actually a pretty tough one in my opinion.
Yeah, man, I think if Furia wouldn't have had such a cold start yesterday, I think I would have been like 100% for them. The way E United played yesterday impressed me a lot, but at that point I have to think about, do I weigh up the last 6 months of play, or do I weigh one day? One day of performance, right? So at that point, I think logically you have to go with like the consistency, and so I'm going to go with Furia here on home turf to make it happen.
I'm going to have to go with E United. I'm going to go with the one-day performance for myself. I think the level of confidence coming out of E United when I spoke to them, and also their play to back it up yesterday, although they did lose, this is the match that really matters. This is an elimination match. The pressure is on. I'm fully expecting them to live up to that occasion and come out on top.
I, too, am going to side with E United. I'm going to stick with it. I think that they probably should have won that game against Avangard yesterday. I think they kind of dropped the ball. They fell apart when they needed to, just stay together most. So I am also going to say that E United will take this one. Furia looked that cold start could really backfire on the first map, and then you let E United start building momentum, and you start getting that confidence going for players like Vanity, Food, Marky, like these guys who can just pop off. Once that confidence is like just blossoming, it's going to be hard to turn that around. We do have the Twitch chat results as well, so we'll take a peek and see if they agree with us or not. No.
Well, they agree with one of us.
We are outnumbered, but it's okay. It's okay. We were outnumbered in the first game of the day, too, and it was pretty close.
I think the thing with Furia is again, like if you just look at the product as a whole, not just the shallowness of a one-day result from yesterday, Furia is the more proven team, and they've more consistently performed. I mean, this team of E United, most of those guys are just stepping up to the professional level. 4 of those 5 players have mostly been playing in like Mountain Dew League and smaller tournaments for the bulk of their careers, whereas Furia have been regularly beating middle-of-the-pack professional teams and qualifiers like the last 6 months or so. And again, at least they had that experience of going through the minor system, going to the major. Not really many people on that United side have that type of pedigree. So you really have to think about consistency, and I think it's there for Furia. I think they're also just a little bit deeper. Like, I think, again, it's really relying on Hail Marys on United yesterday against Avangard. I think Furia have more gears they can shift through.
For sure, but on the United side of things, they are less experienced, but I think they should capitalize on that, really embrace the fact that they're new within the scene, and that gives them a little bit more freedom, a little less pressure to be able to do set pieces specifically, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe that'll be one of the things that ends up working towards their favor, but we do have our casters standing by. It's the dynamic duo of Scronders.
Hey,
Buck,
what's up, guys?
Buck, you're not even pandering when it's a free prediction now.
Yeah.
Like, here's a time where you can pander and the team's going to win, and you go ahead and go against them.
Hey, I actually got threatened by the Brazilians.
He's pandering
so
to his hometown crowd.
Exactly.
That is going to take an explanation, Buck. That's
Yeah,
a
you
slippery slope,
probably-
bro. That's context.